Welcome to Deep Thought. Consciousness must change. And, one of a very popular quote that floats around, I believe it was attributed to Albert Einstein. I believe it was. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Right? Please correct me, because you know how stuff floats around and it gets applied and 2 or 3 famous people say it. But consciousness, what I believe Einstein said, I believe it was Einstein who said, you cannot solve a problem in the same consciousness that it was created. And that was a powerful statement. And, briefly I want to talk about our consciousness must change, right? Because we can't, it's obvious. We can just be on social media for 10 minutes and see all the issues happening in the world. Poverty, ignorance, racism, crime, hatred, ignorance, I'm going to say that twice. And we're trying to solve the problems with the same thought patterns that actually created the problems. And how's that going to work? How is that going to work? Because we don't realize the consciousness that we currently have actually created the issues. Just the consciousness, how people thinking in society have actually created the issues. And then we try to solve the problem using the same tools. And it was just like, wait a minute, this is going back and forth. And of course, I've done a recent podcast on how the world is, many things in the world are actually creates a dysfunction, actually profits off of dysfunction. But so then how are we going to solve it? When consciousness, I'm going to tell you what, one thing, there's a confusion about consciousness. Like, you have many people calling themselves conscious because they know something. They have information. They confuse information with conscious, like, you have it in some new age communities, like they don't use the term conscious as much, but they'll talk about whatever, there's a wide range of things, and like, oh, I'm conscious. Or in the black community, right, somebody got some history of the West African empires or something, or history from some point in Kemet, and it's like, oh, I'm conscious. No, that's information. Conscious is as it says, or what people using now, woke. I'm like, no, what's conscious? It's not the information. In fact, somebody can be conscious without having any information. Conscious is just being awake. Because I'm gonna tell you what, most people around here are sleepwalking. Little story. I'm recording this on a Monday morning, right? Yesterday, it was Sunday. Well, went out to eat with my sons, and then we were going to go by this park and fly some kites, right? Yeah, they're funny. They're funny with that. One doesn't like to let it go too high. He likes to keep it close. The other one, he'll let it go high, but just walk around be thinking about something else. Anyway, right, I remember we were driving there, right, and I drove right past the park from the restaurant. I drove right past the park, and I was like, oh, man. And my son looked at me. He's like, I was thinking you missed a turn. So I went back, and I thought about that. I was so used to driving a certain place and so used to a certain pattern, I passed by what I wanted to do. That's not consciousness right there. That's sleepwalking. Most people, if you think about it, most of us, when we walking down the street, when we doing anything, we're just going through the motions. Real consciousness is being aware of what we're doing every single second. Conscious is not being, because usually when people go along, they're either thinking about what happened in the past or what's going to happen in the future. They're not present. They're not in the moment. Conscious is like you paying attention to everything going around you, right? Right there, you like awake, literally awake. And as some person once told me, he was like, you could get knocked out and barely functional, could follow the fingers around, and that could be conscious. But you want to be fully awake. One of the things people have to do is be conscious of how individually they're contributing to the problems. Contributing to what you're doing. And when we talk about all these isms out here, many people, they might think they're one way, but then they commit actions that actually contribute to it. Like I give you an example. I mean, we all know about racism. Somebody could consider themselves liberal and cool, but then unconsciously do something on a job to hinder a person, a person of another race, And, it ain't just a black thing. It could be against a group, anything, or even, I'll use a term, sexism. You could have a man who thinks he's fairly, liberal, and, he can even call himself a male feminist, but then he'll treat women under his management in a paternalistic way, because they don't think they're as capable, So it's like, if we want to change stuff, we have to change how we're thinking, and we have to examine not only our own thinking, but then how does that spread? Okay, I'm tripping over something. How does that spread community-wide, culturally, into society? We have to change how we're thinking. All the problems we have now, we got to change how we're thinking. That's why it's not being solved. We do the same thing. I'll use a black community, for example. It's like we're seeing all the problems, but then we keep doing the same thing. It's like, okay, wait a minute. We got to change this up. This isn't working for us. We got to change how we're thinking. It was like, and that's it. You got to expand the consciousness. And like I said, it's not about information. Information is good. I'm going to tell you what, information is good only in terms if it changes your consciousness. Like if, using an example of the West African empires, right? Okay, the information, but are you still doing the same stuff you were doing before you learned the information? Like people are complaining about, I don't know. People are complaining about cancer and everything, and you got the information saying, well, cigarettes cause it, and you get some person, they sitting up there and thinking about, well, yeah, cancer's bad. I don't want to get cancer, but they puffing on a cigarette, especially when they have warning labels on there to say, hey, this could cause cancer. So think about that. Think about that. Their consciousness hasn't changed, even though they had the information. See, and that's what consciousness must have. Society, individuals first, then society-wide must change their consciousness. The consciousness, that's what has to happen. People have to think about stuff. That's one of the things I wanted to do with this channel. If y'all notice on a lot of videos, I don't speak in like absolutes like you must. Even though I just say consciousness must change, but most of the time I put stuff out there for people to think about it. Because ultimately if they think about it, that's when they can come to first a personal answer and then an answer that they can share with society. Yeah, get what I'm saying? But yeah, that has to happen. Like, and that's one thing. And like I said, that's something I work on. Everybody has to work on that. I work on being in the moment. Like I said, I drive past a place that I knew I consciously wanted to go, but because I was, just not in the moment in like sleepwalk mode, I drove right past it. So anyway, as always, it's something to think about. It's something to consider. So anyway, that's it for today. I'll talk to y'all later. Peace and blessings.